Salibonani, Linjani, Makadini, a very good day to you all. The name is Scorch Royalty and welcome to Planet B. Today we'll be discussing Zimbabwe moving towards a just energy transition and the financing options that are involved. And I'm joined with two gentlemen who will help me discuss this topic. Welcome to Nashe and welcome to UC.
Thank you.
So the topic of climate change and climate financing and everything that comes within sounds all technical and scientific. So we want to make it as easy as possible to understand to our audience. So if you don't mind introducing yourself and help us understand what we mean when we're talking about the just energy transition.
My pleasure. My name is Moyo Tulani. I'm from the office of the MP. For Wange Central.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. My name is Tinashe Matika, District Programs Manager for Wange Youth Empowerment Initiative, and we are happy to join your audience and dissect the conversation.
So we're here in the city of Kings, and we're at the Zimbabwe Alternative Mining Indaba, ZAMI 22. So Tulani, if you would help us maybe define or explain what we mean when we're talking about the just energy transition. What exactly are we talking about?
Okay, like you earlier on alluded to say, this is a technical, scientific process. It's a bit complicated to an ordinary person out there, but just to try and simplify it so that at least everyone understands. It is a practice, it is a process of moving away from the extractive activities into having green energy, where we are able to limit the activities that emanate a lot of carbon and also try to take the direction of green energy. I think in brief, that's the definition of a just transition.
Okay, and then I'm going to give this to Tinashe. Tulani mentioned how it's a transition into ensuring that especially extractive locations, extractive cities are moving towards clean energy, are moving towards green energy. So how best can our country go about it? How best, like you come from Wange, which is an extractive town already, how best can Zimbabwe go about this whole transition?
Thank you. The best way we can progressively advance just energy transition is through our procedural rights. We need to review our laws, particularly to amend and strengthen the structures and the processes with which we govern our energy generation, our fossil fuel utilization, and domestic resource mobilization. Because we have, while we are mining and while we are generating energy, we still have huge taxation imbalances. So these are also possible sources to aid in the transition. But we cannot do that as long as these public institutions continue to leak.
Okay, and then so Africa literally contributes less to the carbon emissions globally, but we've got the great powers, especially in the European countries. They are the ones who are actually contributing to these carbon emissions, but then we are bearing the brunt as Africans, or bearing the brunt as Zimbabweans when it comes to funding or this transition of just energy. So in your view, Tulani, whose agenda is this? Who fit the just energy transition agenda? Because as it stands, Zimbabweans are paying the carbon tax, but when you then compare us to powers like China, to America, to the United States of America, we cannot compare our carbon emission despite us having coal and fossil fuel in Zimbabwe. So who's setting the agenda? Who's setting the just energy transition agenda?
Yeah, so I think my honest view is that it's about the power dynamics in terms of the West and us down here, where the developed countries are bullying us, are taking advantage of our situation and they are actually bringing in their agenda so that at the end of the day they are able to achieve whatever they want to achieve at the end of the day. So I don't think Africa is just receiving the brand, but like you have said that most of the emissions in terms of the percentage, we are actually emitting less, but at the end of the day we are still forced to actually toe the line. So we are not actually owning the agenda in this process. We are not owning the means of this process. We are just following what has been designed by those countries from the West.
Okay, Tinashe, if you would like to chip in on that one, on who's setting the just energy transition agenda, because like Tilani is saying that we're emitting less, but we're also then bearing the brand to go green, to go clean, to go green and to go clean, but yet we're contributing less when it comes to carbon emission.
All right, I do agree with Tulani. However, I do share some other divergent sentiments, particularly with regards to the fact that as we sit and stand here at ZAMI 2022, we are the ones setting the agenda now. Yes. So originally, it seems the agenda emanated from the global north.
Okay.
However, due to the spike in awareness levels, we are able to also realize the inequalities from a domestic point of view. And we are slowly reshaping the conversation, particularly to our low emissions development strategy and our nationally determined commitments. These are locally based attempts towards reshaping the agenda, because we are part of the value chain. We have the natural resources, but at times we realize that the processing and the harnessing of these might be feeding into other economies. But while we are realizing the nature of the inequality, we have to reassess where we stand on the issue. But the conversation on just transition is really about ensuring the equitable distribution of the revenue that we generate from our domestic mineral resource mobilization, and also particularly also the socio-economic development of communities located in and around extractive areas.
Okay, thank you very much. And so 600 million Africans have an energy need which hasn't been met. This is a huge number. 600 million Africans have an energy need that hasn't been met by their governments and their authorities. So then we realize that we're fighting energy poverty, but at the same time, globally, we have to tackle the just energy transition. So in your own view, how best can we then tackle this as a country? You know, as bringing it back to Zimbabwe, we've got the Zimbabwe renewable energy policy, but is it really working, or it's simply something that's on paper and that's not being achieved, like actually when it comes to what's on the ground? How best can we tackle the just energy transition as a country?
My honest view is that when we look at, like I said, that this agenda actually is not ours, in the sense that you've already mentioned the figure that most of the Zimbabweans or most of the people in Africa are not accessing this energy that is already there. So for us to then say we want to move towards the green energy, and we then expect to solve the issue of the energy poverty, it becomes theoretical, because we need to first address these inequalities in terms of the energy that we already have, and then we are then able to move to the green energy, and at least we have confidence as we move towards that, to say at least this green energy everyone will be able to access it, because we have already solved the historical inequalities that we have. So for me, I think for now it's a bit theoretical, because practically we need to first resolve these inequalities that are there. Then we are then able to move with confidence to the next level of this green energy. Of the
just energy transition. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Chidani. Tinashe, what are your sentiments when it comes to practicability of the Zimbabwe renewable energy policy and the government actually tackling the just energy transition?
I will, as always,
go back to the policy.
I will go back to the procedural aspects of our policies. This is where we can grant grassroots communities the ability to actively influence and shape the nature of our environmental projects, the nature of the domestic resource mobilization. Because right in there, that's where you find the gaps that create for disappropriate corporate social responsibility. You find someone has made $1 million, but has given back $100 and they feel it is appropriate. So as I said earlier on, let's strengthen the procedural rights. The aspect of the law, that is where our foreign investors are finding loopholes. This is where they often get the ability to abuse tax havens. So let's go back to a people-centered development policy.
Okay, Tinashe will always stick to his thoughts and sentiments when it comes to the policy and the procedures that come with policy making. Tinani, you are from the office, from the MP's office. I'm going to put you on the spot, but don't worry, you won't get in trouble with your bosses. There's always an issue with Zimbabwe. We've always had an issue with accountability and transparency when it comes to our government, when it comes to those in power and the citizens. So there's carbon tax, which some people don't even know that they actually pay every time that they're purchasing fuel at the gas station. How is carbon tax contributing to the just energy transition in Zimbabwe, or is it being used for something else which is not the just energy transition?
Yeah, for a country, like you say, that you're going to put me on the spot, but I think I'm going to do justice to the question. For a country, the issue of accountability has always been an issue. The governance system deliberately does not create a platform for accountability. The office bearers, they always get away with murder in terms of public funds, in terms of public service. So I think we need to start from the top, where we are able to have policies, where we are able to have laws that actually speak to accountability. If you go to other countries, just for a public office or a public officer to be found with a case maybe of corruption or something, there is actually a stern action that is being taken against that person. But when it comes to Zimbabwe, people are able to walk away with murder, even if they are implicated on public funds, or have abused the public funds. You still find that person after a year, after 2 years, is back again into the public office. So I think that's where we are starting from. So in terms of the communication, it is a deliberate move, so that there is no accountability in terms of giving people the information to say these carbon taxes, this is how they are being used. So it's a deliberate move. It's a carpet that is being used to actually have under carpet deals, so that at the end of the day, the public is not able to pick these omissions along the processes.
Okay, and Tinashe, what are your sentiments when it comes to the carbon tax that I am sure a couple of Zimbabweans have no idea that they actually pay every time? And is it actually being used or being distributed to where it's supposed to go? Is it actually being used for the just energy transition and going green and creating a cleaner city and a cleaner Zimbabwe, or is actually being used for something else?
I think in your question, there already is an answer. We are not seeing the visible application of the carbon tax. We haven't seen or heard of any projects or community relief funding from the carbon tax. Particularly, then you have the case of Wange, where we have the much needed carbon sinks that are supposed to be funded by the carbon tax, but we do not see that. We do not have any carbon sequestration programming, and the nature with which the funding for the tax is collected and redistributed is shrouded in secrecy. As Tulani just cited, that there is a a huge veil that creates a barrier in terms of accessing the information, who has contributed, how much has been collected, how is it being used, how can people even affect the direction or the processes taken in the decision making. Then you also have, when you're talking about taxes, we also have the glaring inability by the Auditor General to implement financial changes or to implement those recommendations. So you have a problem. Even if we were to ascertain how much money has been generated, we generally have a challenge with the compliance of our public finance laws.
Okay. We have been talking about Zimbabwe's just energy transition and the financing options that are available when it comes to the Zimbabwean context. And in our closing remarks, Tulani, maybe you would share on the hindrances or the humps that are coming when it comes to Zimbabwe's just energy transition. And Tinashe, maybe you would actually share on the recommendations to the CSOs, the recommendations to the government on how best we can tackle the just energy transition. So I'll start with you, Tulani, on the hindrances or the hurdles that Zimbabwe is facing when it comes to the just energy transition.
Basically, what I think is, since you mentioned that this is more of a technical, more of a scientific process, I think the communities currently, at the moment, if you go out there and meet a citizen and talk about the just transition energy, I think less than 10% of the population of Zimbabwe really understands this thing. So I think our first step is to create an awareness within our citizens on what is just transition energy, because obviously if you bring something that people do not understand, there is bound to be a resistance. So I'm seeing that resistance and becoming a hindrance in terms of this process, because most of the citizens are not even aware. And I think the second aspect is the confidence. Do the citizens really have confidence to say, okay, when we take this route, are we going to benefit from it? Because historically, we have seen the processes that the citizens have not benefited. So I think that's my second in terms of the hindrance, that there is no confidence out there in the citizens of this process. The first one is they need to know what is happening, they need the information. Then the second aspect is to create that confidence. The third aspect, I think, the accountability, where we are able to account, where we are able to give information freely, where people are able to access this information, so that people do not think that maybe there are other sinister motives behind in terms of this process. So I think those, for me, if we try and address those, they might eliminate the hindrances that we might face. But these are just few of the main
hindrances.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tulani is saying that there are actually many hindrances and many hurdles when it comes to Zimbabwe's just energy transition, and one of the first things that he mentioned is the access to information. That if you go to the communities, if you go to our extractive cities and even the non-extractive cities and towns, people don't even understand or don't even know what just energy transition is. So there's a need to raise awareness so people get to understand what exactly we'll be talking about when we're talking about the just energy transition and how it even affects the ordinary Zimbabwean. Is it good or is it bad for Zimbabwe to be transitioning into just energy? And then Tinashe, in your closing remarks, what are your recommendations? What could be done so that Zimbabwe has a smooth just energy transition?
I think Tulani mentioned a few. I will buttress a couple of what he said, ideas of what he said, and hopefully share other insights.
Okay.
The issue of awareness is a challenge, particularly because when we're talking about just energy transition, these are not concepts indigenous to our local languages or cultures. So you find there is a need to adapt the material into local languages. There's also a need to adapt it into other disaggregated forms of data, such as information concerning those living in the rural areas, senior citizens, war veterans, people living with disabilities. So there really is a need to readdress the information sharing and dissemination platform. And one of the earliest suggestions we've had is perhaps maybe we can introduce these conversations at educational level, at primary level, at secondary level, and at tertiary level. Introduce public finance management, introduce natural resource governance, introduce these conversations around taxation, just energy transition, so that the conversation is occurring naturally, even at community level. Then we also have the issue, the big crippling issue of resource-backed loans, particularly with regards to the extractive sector. That is a problem. I think someone during the procession said when you borrow money, it is like you've stolen from your future self. And we imagine if we continue with these resource-based loans, we are leveraging our rights over the influence and the control of our natural resources, as we are often forfeiting the extraction of these resources. Then you also have the issue of the public debt that is being created by these resource-backed loans. This is something that cannot be dealt away by simply introducing a new tax, because we are already a broad base of taxation that is primarily crippling the grassroots presence. So let's rethink this. Then we go to the policies that are being used. Policy is merely a function of human coexistence, human wants and needs. So if the policy on its own does not favor youth empowerment or grassroots empowerment, by either the ambiguity in the terms of the contract, by either even concessionary terms that we are not privy to, this then creates a huge disconnection. Often that manifests in people failing to exploit the value chain. So this also brings us to something else, that in order to progressively advance the conversation around just energy transition and climate change adaptability, that means we also have to make it next to easy for people to commercialize activities in the informal sector around these areas. We have your non-timber production youths, we have youth producing, youth in brick molding, using coal slurry. These are all people in the informal sector. Why can't we then progressively review our law, our company registration laws, set a youth-friendly company registration bracket? Why should the licenses cost us so much when we already don't have money? This is a challenge now. The policies that we are using to drive the development and the conversation are what we need to review and make them people-centered.
So there you have it. We were discussing Zimbabwe's move towards the just energy transition and the financing options that are available. And you've heard Tinashe is big on policy, and Tulani was mentioning also the issue of accountability, the issue of transparency. And if you were listening and watching, I'm sure you'd pick that from both Tulani and Tinashe, they mentioned how that we also involve people from the grassroots level all the way up, not starting from the top to the bottom, because usually the people at the bottom tier are usually left out. And when we then bring those terms like the just energy transition, climate change, people don't understand what exactly we'll be talking about. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching us. This was Planet B, and the name is Marvelous to name Bochi Bagidi. Till we meet again, it's goodbye for now.